Hi, hello, welcome back. So this is going to be the third video of my series on the topic CI/CD workflow for Fabric. And as I mentioned, and as being defined in the series, I wanted to talk about the three perspectives that you need to consider when you're coming from when the goal is to have a Power BI report and you wanted to migrate to Fabric. And as I mentioned on the series index, we have three perspectives. We have the infrastructure as code, which I already recorded. There's a couple of videos, so more than welcome to join and watch. Also, the second perspective is the development cycle. I mean, the perspective from a developer point of view and how to deal with Power BI from the development perspective. That is check in, check out, saving a report to using a project, so on and so forth. And the third perspective, which is the topic of this video, is a release and continuous delivery. That is, once you have the version of your report ready to be published in non-development environments, well, how you do it, in particular, how you do it, but in with the context of what you do, how you do it with automation. And that's the focus, right? And one of the main parts that I want to talk about a couple of techniques, and in addition to that one, how to manage environments. Okay, so that's why I prepare a series of exercises, right, within the demo that I'm just going to show you to tackle the whole cycle. Okay, so that's what we are going to do today. And with today's video, we're going to close the series. And I hope you find it useful and use the techniques that I'm going to show you for developing and use your Power BI reports. Nonetheless, and once again, I repeat it along the series, this is even though I'm using Power BI reports because there's a specific segment or a niche of people that would like to know this workflow with that perspective, that does not mean that what I'm showing you only work with Power BI reports. It could be working with many other Fabric items, which probably I will tackle in a different series if you want me to do so. But again, this is applicable to Fabric platform as a whole. Quick announcements is that for fiscal year 2026, I've been named Fabric super user for the Fabric community. So thank you very much, Microsoft, for the distinction and pins here that I'm showing and showing you very proudly. So thank you very much. And with that being said, let's jump right into it. Okay. So the last video, what we had. So in the last video, we end up with a little bit of a cliffhanger, right? We have a report, and what we did, we have a report which is a Power BI report right here, the one that you're seeing, sorry. And then we have in our Git repository, we also said that in order to make this process and to develop safely, you need to have this one as a feature branch. And then from the feature branch, we're going to merge back to the branch that has this workspace that will function or serve as an integration hub for many different threads of developers from other development people that's working the report actively. So many people will have their own features. One feature could be adding one visual. Another feature could be adding one adding a change to an existing report, adding a new report, adding a new page. So all of those threads are features from my perspective, and all of them will be at the end integrated into one development/integration workspace, and that will be the entry point to be promoted to open environments, in this case, non-development environments like UAT and production. Now, that in general, I talk about in the last series and in the development life cycle perspective. So we'll check it out. But now we're going to tackle what happens once you merge one of those threads of development, one of those features into the main integration workspace, and then how can we automatically deploy those changes all the way to UAT in production. Okay. All right, so in order to prepare this one, what I'm going to do is this. So first, I already have my feature branch that is a feature branch out of the workspace that is my integration workspace. Okay, so what I'm going to do first is to create a report, and we have a report. So I'm just going to save it here. So let me show you. So I'm going to save this report. I'm going to browse through my local computer. Then I'm going to save it as a Power BI project. Remember, right? Project file within my local file, which is, let me show you. Yes, so I'm just going to save this report right off, okay? And then this report, or in this case, the Power BI project report will be now saved and ready for me to publish it, okay? So my branch is empty, as you can see here, and now we added my report and my semantic model and all this new structure that I also talked about in my last video. Okay, so let's not go there just yet, okay? So what I'm going to do now is the next thing I'm going to do is to so I'm going to have this report, and without further ado, I'm going to publish. Okay, so let me just put really quickly for you guys to see in real time what are we talking about. Okay, and I'm just going to try to do this one as, as easy and step by step as possible for you to see everything that is going on. Okay, so on my left-hand side, you will have three environments. We have my sandbox, and this sandbox environment is the one, as you can see here. I'm just going to go really quickly, Git integration, and it's connected to this feature workspace sandbox environment, which is this branch that I'm just showing you here, and I'm about to commit my changes to this workspace via this feature branch. That clear? Okay, so let's publish my new report. I'm going to do, and I'm going to make and publish, and then what's going to happen, and if you remember, we are going to, and this probably will be a reminder that when we are not yet automated this process, in order for you to integrate the changes coming from your feature branch into your workspace, you need to go here, right, into the source control, and you will see that we have now two updates coming, right? So the changes coming or going from the workspace to the branch are featured or point out in the changes tab, but the changes coming from the branch into your workspace are indicated in the update. So in this case, I did commit to reports, and then this is what we have, right? So we are going to integrate those reports, and then notice a couple of things that I need you to be aware of, right? If not already. So right now, we have in my report, we have this visuals showing some data, right? I mean, the fact that the visuals are showing the graphics and visuals, which now represents that means that we do have data in here. But if you remember, when you're working now with Power BI projects, you're not bringing any data, right? So it will be expected for me to go click here and saying no data, right? Because the semantic model is empty. The project does not contain any data. The project only contains the define of the definition of the report. All right. So what will be the expectation for you to just go here and click refresh in the semantic model, and the semantic model may work? And probably many of you will say, well, yeah, well, yes, but no. So, and the reason why is because we have an additional step that we need to fulfill in order to actually be able to fetch data. Since my report, the one that I'm using here, right, is, let me just show you really quickly in my data source settings, I am connecting through a local SQL server, right? With SQL, with this database called wealthdb-dev, right? To indicate that's the development environment. So my sandbox environment and my development environment, I want them both to fetch data from this database, right? So when we are pushing this connection through my report, and then we click directly the refresh button, it will work because I'm trying to fetch information from a cloud-based from cloud, right, based service like Azure into an on-prem location, which is my computer. So that's not going to fly. And really quickly, how we resolve that? And we resolve that by installing what we call here a connection gateway, right? A connection gateway is a piece of software that I install on my local computer, or in this case, the computer that it's accessible through the on-prem database that you wanted to access, okay? So, which is this one. And then when I do this, I'm allowing this gateway will be the bridge between the cloud and your on-premises, okay? Now, on top of that, what we needed to do is create a connection. And this is the connection that I have. Let me show you really quickly. If I go to settings, I'm saying this is a new connection, on-prem SQL connection -dev, that is using the gateway that I just showed you previously, right? And I'm using, and then the server that I wanted to access is this one, and the SQL database that I wanted to access is this one, which corresponds, as you can imagine, to the connection that I have in my Power BI report showing in here, right? So far so good? Nice. Okay. So let me close this one because I don't think we're going to use this one anymore. Well, no, yeah, sorry. We're going to use it for one more thing. So I'm going to keep it open for 1 second. All right. So how to complete this one now, and this is going to be relevant because eventually we wanted to repeat the same operation automatically in UAT and our integration development environment. So let's just look how it will be if we do it manually, or in this case, we having our sandbox environment and we're going to do it manually. We're going to automate once we start the cycle in the automation process. Okay. Now, then we have our connection, we have our gateway, we have a semantic model, and then what we needed to do here is going to settings, and then we're going to gateway and cloud connections. And then what we needed to do is to map, right? Now, here it says map to, in the documentation, the term will be binding the semantic model with a connection. And this is exactly what we're doing right now. So by binding my connection coming from the Power BI report into a connection, existing connection in Fabric, right? By doing this, we are going to complete the handshake. And then once we have our semantic model ready, then we can go, and now we can go to Sandbox and I can go to my semantic model, refresh, and if all the things that I just said it's true, then the refresh of the semantic model will be successful. As you can see here, it's working. And then in a few seconds, the refresh of the semantic model will be complete. And then, obviously, I think I'm pointing out the obvious. We will see the report with the visuals showing data, right? Okay, so done. It's done. So we go to the report, and then we can refresh our visuals, and then boom, we have data. So it worked. Okay, fair enough. Now, the reason why I'm saying this is because the automatic binding of a semantic model to an existing connection, it's something that we want to automate, right? In my sandbox environment, I did it manually, But this is not something that we wanted to do manually all the time. On the contrary, we want this to be automated, right? And then that's the value of the techniques that I'm going to show you, right? How to deal with that one from the API perspective, which is actually how we are going to automate that one. Okay, let's move forward. Now, the second thing that it's very common in this type of scenarios is the use of what we call role level security. That's very, very common because what we want is to create a feature. It's a security feature that allows you to showing according to roles data, right? So I'm saying I want people that live in Norway to have only data that it's from Norway, right? Or do you have people from Denmark only seeing people from Denmark and so on and so forth? So that's a functionality that we will have via role level security. So this is exactly what we are going to do as a second task. All right. Now let me show you how we do that. Let's go back to our report. Okay. And then we have here, just in terms for you to understand the process, I'm just going to do it using one another thing called expense type. So as you can see in this report, I can have different types of expenses. I have fixed, not available, or variable type of expenses. And just for the sake of this exercise, I want a role that allows only to see fixed expenses. All right. So how do we do that? Let's do the role level security. Now, if we go to modeling and we go to manage roles, let's add a new role, right? So the new role is going to be named fixed expenses. Okay, so let's rename this one. Rename fixed expenses. And then I want the fixed expenses that where description it only be right? That's what I want. I want a role level security that when active or applied to the people part of this the fixed expenses should only see the fixed type of expenses. All right? So that's it. So let's save. One really easy way to test the effects of that is by clicking View As. Okay, so if I click View As and I wanted to say, okay, what's going to happen if I view this report as or through the lenses of the role level security fixed expenses only? So if I click OK, as you can see here, I will only be able to see fixed expenses and all the categories to belong to fixed expenses, right? So we can check that it's working. Fine. Now, and then you, at this point of time, probably if you're more familiar with Power BI, you understand that we also need then to have people enroll to this role, right, or be member of this role, so that people will be the ones that will see the data through the lenses of that role. All right. But as you can see here, you cannot define such a list. If you go to the meta reports, you cannot define that list here. That list of people can only be defined in the service in the cloud. So let me show you. Okay. So we configured our role level. I'm going to save my report one more time. And then as you can expect, or I would expect to see some additional changes. There it goes. Yes. And we can see, let me just try to put this one a little bit to this. And then we can see here my fixed expense model, right? Or role definition here. But still, I don't see anywhere where I can find the users that will belong to this one. So I'm going to show you in a second how. So let's add my new role level role. Once again, I'm committed to my sandbox, and then, okay, so initiating push. So right now it's working. It's trying to send the latest changes to the branch. It's done. Now we are going to my sandbox environment in Fabric. Again, I can see some changes coming over from my branch, changes belonging to the semantic model. So let's update all, right? And then once we integrate those changes, so let me put this one again a little bit bigger so for you to see, right? So if I go to semantic model and I'm going to security, now I can see fixed expenses only, right? And now there's an option for you to add people to this new role, right? We cannot do that one in Power BI, so we need to do this. Now, and then the question is, how do I add members to this? Via API. And the problem is that there isn't, as of now, an interface that will allow you to do this, unfortunately. So what are the options? And this is something that I proposing, right? This solution that I applied for a company that I work for. And we have in Python a library called sempy library that allows you to interact with the engine behind the semantic models in the cloud, right? So the way I fix this one, and please, if you, in the audience you have a much better way to do it, please, by all means, or a different way or more. I'm very pragmatic person without being a too complicated solution, something that it's to be really easy to implement in a way, right? So please let me know. The way I solved it was this. I knew that we can use the sempy library, and that is via notebooks. So it's my, okay, why don't I, and knowing that I can execute or automate many of the things in Fabric, and I know for a fact that I can execute notebooks. All right, so it's like, okay, let's then create a notebook. And then what I'm going to do is to automate the execution of that notebook, right? So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to have here, I just created a sample, right? As you can see, a sample notebook here. So let me just clone this one. Okay, so I'm going to clone this one, notebook number 2. And I just put a simple few rows. This notebook be the name of the semantic model to apply, or just for the sake of simplicity, because I don't have to define another library. So my rule, this is I coded to work like this, right? So all this, the things I'm just going to show you right now need a little bit of code. That good thing for you. I'm sharing the code that I'm using, right? But bear with me. This is the code. And then we need to do one additional thing that this is really, really important for you to understand why I'm doing this. When you clone big items like the way I'm doing, right? In the folder dot platform, it has a logical ID. You need to change with a new logical ID. Otherwise, when you try to push the changes to Fabric, it will say this logical ID already exists. So this is not something really very difficult to solve, just more to be aware that this is how it works. There's there's many different portals out there that allow you to create or generate new logical IDs, or in this case, UIDs. So in SQL, there's a very easy and neat function called new ID. So let's take this generated logical ID as you're seeing me doing here. Let's replace this one with it, and it's more than enough for this to work. Okay, so let's just take and while we have this one, as you can see here, I have my 3 databases one for dev, one for UT, one for production, because obviously one of the parts that we want to achieve in the continuous delivery is to connect dev with dev, UAT or test with UAT, or test with test, and production with production. And we will be heading towards that part in a moment. For the time being, just showing you that I have different databases. Each database in dev, I only have a very small, I only have, I believe, 2023 information just for development purposes. And UAT, I have a couple more years, and in production, I have the whole database as is, right? As expected. You can have, for instance, a very common scenarios for you to have in dev only dummy data or mockup data, and UAT probably a partial amount of the production data, and then production of the live version of the production data, right? So there's many different ways. This is my quick demo interpretation of this process. Okay. Moving forward. Now, I mentioned that I am having or supporting or using a notebook with a library called sempy. You can go and I will put the link in the article information, but the sempy library allows you to interact with the, in this case, with the semantic model. And as you can see, the sempy library also have this function that allows you to connect to the semantic model and then add a role member. In this case, I'm using, let me just going, because the user will have admin on the on the workspace. So with this user, I won't be able to show you the effects of the role level security implementation. A different account, which is my Svenq at Friday.com. Friday. Okay. Now, there are more things that I want you to see before I push the changes upwards. Oh, of course, we are going to say that the role name that we are going to add is this one. Remember, we have the roles fixed expense only. So in fact, you know what? Now that I'm here, I'm just going to copy paste so I don't move or have anything that typos or errors like that. Okay, fair enough. Now we are almost ready. One additional thing that I want you to see is this part, right? And this is going to be very important because we are going to use also the libraries, the variable libraries, which in combination with the deployment rules in Fabric deployment pipelines, this combination of techniques will allow us to control the different configurations in between different environments, right? So for the time being, just take the fact that we have this by using the notebook utils, and we're going to call to this notebook the environment variables, right? Which is a Fabric item that I will show you in just a second. And from that, I'm fetching a couple of things. In this in particular, I'm just going to fetch the key vault URI that I'm going to use, right? And from this, because now in this part, as you can see here, it will read from that key vault and it will fetch the secrets from client ID, tenant ID, and secret ID, right? So imagine that you have development and UAT. In this exercise, we're going to use only those two environments. But I want that from dev takes from the development key vault, and UAT will take from another key vault, right? So how do we specify that in one environment you take from one key vault, in another environment you take from another key vault? And the answer is through environment variables. Okay. So moving along. I have all the changes that I need, and then what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to publish my changes. Okay, so adding my RLS configuration config node. All right. So whoops, I think I just click commit. I need to commit and push. Okay, there it goes. So pushing, and then once again, let's go back. Okay, let's go back to my workspace, which is Sandbox workspace. Going here. Okay. Okay, Sandbox, and let's once again integrate my changes. All right, so notebook, update all. So what is the next step? We can complete because multiple have the same change. Oh, sorry, let me show you really quickly what went wrong. When I created the well dashboard notebook, I didn't in also the name. So I just need to display name, change it from the well figure well dashboard semantic model. So apologies for that. I missed to rename display name. Oops. Sorry for that. So once again, let's push it. All right. And then there it goes. Yes. Fair enough. So let's update once again. Click update all. I believe, let's see, probably just need to refresh this one. And then once again, click search control. And then update all, because now we can see that we have a well dashboard, right? Instead of a notebook. Yeah. Okay, there it goes. Yeah, because remember when I mentioned I created a sample, and with that sample, I send a notebook sample, which is right here. But now I clone it from code, and now I have the workspace that I want, right? So as you can imagine, we are almost ready to push this one. However, there's one more configuration that we needed to do. Okay, now let me show you what, because I mentioned the libraries. So I already have that one. I created the blank environment library that I will be using, right? And as you can see here, right, let's take once again the content or the code, right? So just for you to understand what's going to happen on these two lines. So let me just one a little bit, yeah, a little bit bigger for you to see, right? So I'm saying yes, get from library, get the library environment libraries, which is the one that I'm just showing you here. And from that library, I want the key vault URI, get it from this environment variables through the variable key vault URI. So as you can see, my environment variable is empty. So we need to create a new one, right? So let's create a new variable. As you can imagine, it will be named like this, right? Key vault URI. The type I want to be a string. And then the default value from my environment, and this be CI/CD workflow, key vault, right? But here's the important things. So right now, this is going to be the environment variable that it's active in the file for my sandbox, and it will be, if I don't change it, the same thing in development. So let me just try to put this one a little bit, yeah. But as you can see, you can add value sets. So I'm going to add a new value set. I'm just going to in the context of this environment, this is not the default nor the active, right? But I'm specifying because on open environments, I can say in different environments which of these value sets is the active per environment. So you'll see in a second, once we move to the next exercise, I'm defining two sets of value sets, one for my development that fetch data from keyboard called CI/CD Flow Development Keyboard, and I have another set that I will fetch values from a different keyboard called CI/CD Flow Test Keyboard. All right. So with that, I just can save, agree, and I'm going to show you that when you're doing the other way around, as I promised, right? So now this change is coming from my workspace, and I wanted to push this change towards my. Let's do that. Okay, so new variable value at define, right? So it's gonna this one. Now, this is not mandatory for you to continue. This is just a best practice, okay? Because now that the changes we have are in the ones that apply in our workspace, those are the changes that your Fabric deployment pipeline will use, right? So just bear in mind now, right? Take that in consideration too. So I don't want to overcomplicate in this one. Just saying that. Be careful and to take that into consideration. Okay. Now we have everything that we need as of now to check or to push the changes, right? And now we can see that our semantic model is complete. The level security is configured. We have our semantic model. And then once we want, the next stage is to push these changes, right? We want to push these changes into our integration workspace, which in this case I call dev, right? Which is empty for the time being. But we want that everything that we did in our sandbox environment will be pushed to our integration environment, in this case, dev environment, because again, that will be the entry point for promotion to upper environments. Okay. And now here is what we want. In addition, not only we want that those changes are pushing or published automatically, but we also want the configurations that we did being applied automatically. Remember? So we have for the role level security, as I mentioned, we already configure a notebook that will be executed by the process, but we also need the binding. So in this case, the binding, in my case, I'm done it via also via Vicori, right? And the way I'm going to configure it, I'm going to specify that my dev environment should be bind to my dev connection is as follows. I have here several variable files. As you can see here, I have this my configuration, and I add as many bindings as I want. In this case, it's going to be this, right? What is the model name that I wanted to bind? And again, my model is well dashboard. So let's put it in here. And I'm going to specify that the connection that I'm going to use in order to bind this semantic model is going to be, as you can imagine, one that I previously configured and that exists here. Okay, so I'm going to go into my, and the reason why I wanted to show you also is because if you're wondering what connections are, well, I think it's going to be a good thing for you to understand as well, right? So we have our connections, and yes, so we have two connections, one dev, one UET. I want this connection, right? The semantic model of to be bind with this connection. So I'm just going to take what connection name, my connection, right? Obviously, in test, there will be the test or UAT connection. Okay. So with that, I think I already have all the pieces needed for me to deploy this one. Okay. So let's complete the changes, and I'm going to say, okay, adding the adding the binding between semantic model and right. So by specifying in this one, my code will take this value pairs and through API, it will bind the semantic model to corresponding connection. So yes, I want to commit and push. All right. So now we have everything that we need, and the rest, remember, is to have, and because remember, we have a feature branch, right, in code that we want to merge to development. So now the last part of the puzzle is to go, and I'm going to put this one here for you to see what I'm going to do next, right? Whoops, let me just once again try to put this one in side by side along with, well, come on, sorry. Okay, so I think it will be easier if I do this one first and then this one. Okay, fine. Now, there's one, and I know, certainly that it's going to be a long video, but it's a lot to unwrap. But I'm pretty confident that at the end you will understand the whole process. I just don't want you to say, oh, but I know he did this, but I don't know how he did it. All right? So I'm just showing you everything. Okay? Now, if I go to my pull request, you can imagine a new pull request. Yes, let's create one. And for my sandbox, I want to send it to my W series. Yeah, well, as expected, what type of changes do we have here? Well, to begin with, the changes in my variable library, the changes, obviously the addition of the report that I just created. And here in my variables, we are seeing that the mapping between development and UAT, and not the type of changes, so everything looks good. So this is be my new report, and we're going to send it to this one. Let's see. Now, to this point, we're almost done, but there's a couple of things that you need to do that will happen behind the scenes, which is the trick and pretty much the automation process. This is where the magic is going to happen, because we are going to use DevOps pipelines to orchestrate the execution of stages between my dev and UAT. Okay, let me just first configure and show you how to configure the pipeline. And again, the code is going to be available to you. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create in my series demo a new pipeline. So let's create a new pipeline. All right. And the new pipeline is going to be like this. Just give me 1 second. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to use my repository, the one that I'm using. I know an existing pipeline. Okay. And I'm going to use the the branch that we have. The path, I have it already created, and I will show you a little bit of the code in just 1 second. All right. So there it goes. Yes. So as you can see here in this pipeline, what it does is just goes, fetches the password for the service principal that I'm using for automation, right? From the name of the workspace, I'm taking which is the workspace and pipeline that I'm just going to update. And I'm just going to do 3 steps. One, I'm going to first execute the update from Git, which is that manual step that I show you where you have incoming changes and then you have to click update all. Now the update from Git does that, right? It's like you clicking on that button and all the changes coming from the branch into your workspace gets applied. In addition to that, I'm also executing 2 post-deployment steps. One is the binding of the semantic model, and the other one is the execution of the notebook that will configure the role level security. Correct? The last two is the execution of the stage between your development to UAT to send or to promote the information from one environment to another. So if you remember, or if you haven't ever seen this one, let me show you really quickly what I'm talking about. So right now we have two, this is a Fabric deployment pipeline, and we have development, test, in this case production. I don't have a workspace for production. The pipeline can work with just two environments. It's perfectly possible, like the one I'm showing here. Now, when you click deploy, it will create all your items that exist on my dev environment to my UAT, right? And it will deploy all your changes from dev to UAT. Now, so that's why we need to go through the sequence. First, getting all the changes from my branch into my dev, and then executing the deployment of the stage dev to UAT, right? So this pipeline, through this series of tasks, does all of that by interacting with the API via PowerShell scripting. Okay? Fair enough? All right. So I'm not going to run it. What I'm going to do is save it because we need to do two additional configurations. Now, we are going to click here and click Edit. And this is really important. And I'm going to go to Triggers because now what I need to specify to this pipeline is what is the action that will trigger my pipeline to execute. Okay? So we need to define what is the trigger, and I'm just going to show you in a second. So we need to say, where is this pipeline by default? Take the code that it will be executing. And I'm saying the code is in this branch, right? And I need to specify the trigger. Now, in this one, I'm just going to use the override the YAML continuous integration trigger, right? And then I'm going to include that this specific pipeline only executes when there's changes in this branch. And also I'm going to say that only execute if changes are coming from Fabric, right? What does that mean, really? I mean, what that means, the reason, the rationale behind this one is as follows. Remember that I have here my code. And let me just put this one here. Everything that is actually Fabric, it's in this folder, in this path called /fabric at the root. So I don't want my pipeline to be executed every time I did changes on the variable files or in the extensions, you know, the code from the Power BI scripting, no, sorry, PowerShell scripting is, because it doesn't make sense. I only want my pipeline to be executing only when there's changes in my Fabric elements, right? So that's why I'm saying that only when I'm receiving new changes and when those changes are coming specifically for this path. Make sense? Okay. That's the reason. Okay, fair enough. Now, having this configuration ready, I'm going to save this one, save, and now we are ready. We're ready to integrate and to putting all this thing into work, right? So let's go to the pipelines, and then I'm going to my pull request, which I already have it almost ready. I'm going to approve. I'm going to complete. And I'm going to delete the feature workspace because usually that's also a best practice. It's not mandatory. It's just a best practice. Okay. So let's complete this merge. Boom. And then once this gets completed, remember that we specified a trigger saying, yeah, we have changes in my Fabric environment. Yes. And there's changes in this case, the target branch that we're using. So both conditions are true. Therefore, this pipeline gets executed and start triggering. And remember, this pipeline will execute a series of steps. So let's go and move towards different steps, right? So while this pipeline gets executing. So we are now seeing on our left, right, this series demo dev, which is our target, remember, right? We developed in our sandbox workspace, and now all the things that we use and configure in our workspace, in our sandbox workspace, now we want to bring into our dev, and automatically, in addition, to push from dev to UAT, right? That's the goal. Now, as I mentioned, we are now extracting the secret from the security principle, from the security principle we're using for automation. Second stage is from the name of the workspace. We're getting which is the environment that we need to update. And now, and this requires a drum roll, is the update from Git that it should be executed in just 1 second, and you will see the effects right in front of your eyes. What's going to happen, right? So we are saying workspace is already being initialized, which means that we already have it as a Git. And notice here in the source control that now the update for Git is working, right? So via API, I'm executing the update from Git, and now the workspace is getting all the changes from the branch and apply it to the workspace, right? Actually, that's complete. And as you can see here, put it a little bit, a little bit higher. The second part is action binding the semantic model. And yes, we was actually successfully binding the semantic model. So remember, we did that step in our sandbox manually. Now the semantic model is being done automatically. And now the third part is running the notebook. So if I go to monitor, I will see that we have our notebook that I created, right? So let's refresh. Now I execute it. Now usually it takes a few moments for those notebooks to be executed, because once you execute a notebook, PySpark cluster needs to be created, and usually it takes about 3 minutes for you to start, but it will be in just a second. In this side of the screen, as you can see here, this says that the request has been accepted, because the execution of notebooks as well as the update from Git, it's called as a long-running operation. So what does that mean? You issue the request saying, I want to execute the update from Git, but understanding that the update from Git takes a few minutes, instead of saying, waiting for the process to complete, it will give you the ID of the operation, and then you can check the operation until it's completed. So in my code, this is programmatically, I'm doing that, right? So I'm getting the operation ID, and then I'm looping and saying, okay, wait until the operation is complete, because it's important for me to understand or to be sure that all the configurations are done as I wanted. Okay, so I believe that this succeeded, right? So all my steps were completed successfully. So if I go to my development environment, I can see that and notice that everything is configured. So my semantic model, so let's just check it out. Just going to put this one a little bit on the top. Yeah, so we can see by going to, sorry, no, I picked the wrong one. Yeah, so the semantic model, if I go to security, so the row level security is applied, and the user that I added for the notebook, it's applied. So that worked. The second thing is that my semantic model should be automatically bound. So let's see. Let's go to settings. Sorry, it's also in the semantic model. I keep clicking on the report. There you go. So right now, the service principal is the owner of the semantic model, but as you can see here, it's already bind, right? It maps to the connection that I specified. It should be mapped. So it worked. So if all of this is true, I shouldn't be having any errors if I wanted to refresh the semantic model, which, let's see, if everything works as expected, It should be executed right now, as you can see here. So the semantic model is executing. The semantic model is refreshing its data. As you can see here, I think it's already complete. So if I go to my report, boom, there it goes. So all of this, all I did in the sandbox is now automatically applied. Isn't that awesome? But in addition to that one, I said we also want to deploy this content from dev to UAT, because now we have on our development environment some stuff that we wanted to push to test. How to do that? All right. The pipeline orchestrate this one. Now, why did the pipelines up? Because I also included here, I'm included a feature in DevOps called environments. And in my environment, for this example, I said that this environment test or UAT, and this is a very common scenario, right? Somebody needs to approve. Somebody needs to say, yes, I check on my development environment that all the changes are correct, are successful. Yes, you can continue moving to your UAT or production environment. So I configured this environment to require an approval to continue. All right. So this is very important because currently in Fabric, you don't have that. But it's very important for governance perspective. Right. So in this example, I'm going to say, okay, fine. Yeah, everything. Fine. F. We can see data and row level security correctly. Right. All right. Well, let's approach. Let's then the second part of the process to work. Okay, just let me put this one for you to see the effects, right? And it's really, really awesome for you to see it working in real life. And we're almost ready because we are going to almost hit the limits of what you can do through automation in Fabric. Unfortunately, well, I'm going to show you, and as I promised at the beginning of the video, that I will show you as well deployment in Fabric deployment pipelines, the concept of roles and where are the roles come into effect and play in this process. All right, but we need to first update all the content that I have from my development workspace into my UAT workspace or my test workspace. So that's mandatory to happen first. Okay, so that means that we need to this pipeline to go, and actually now it's about to execute the stage deployment. This is the operation that we're going to do. Here is like we're clicking the deploy, right? As you can see automatically, right? I didn't click it. I promise, I didn't click it. It was the API that did it for me. And as you can see here, the request was accepted. There's also a long-running operation, or LRO. You will see that in documentation. And then again, fine. So it says that all my deployment went successfully. Now the dev and UAT are in sync, and we're happy, right? Because now if I go to my test workspace without doing anything, Fabric did it for me. It just created all the information or all the items from dev into UAT. All right. Also, the pipeline allows you to, one of the things that I like about the pipelines is the fact that you can also selectively deploy other changes through the API. That's not just at this point of time available to selectively deploy through the API. There's probably ways to work around that, but it requires some programming. I'm just saying that it's not in the API out of the box for you to pick and choose what items. In the API currently, you can just deploy stages, right? And deploy stages with all the items within that stage. So just wanted to understand that one. Now, There's a couple of things, and this is where we're almost wrapping this up. I'm going to my dev environment, test environment, and I need to do a couple more things. One is that now, in the context of my UAT environment, I don't want the set that I want used by default in my UAT is not dev. I want it to be test or UAT. So that is the reason why we need to set as active. Okay? So now this process, as of now, I believe it's still a manual step. I don't know if you can automate this one, but for the time being, this is a little still some manual steps that I'm confident that it will eventually be, we will be able to do it programmatically. But remember, the environment variables are a very recent item within Fabric. It was released as in global availability later, I believe, in September, October last year. So it's quite recent. Okay. For the time being, let's for the sake of argument and just for wrapping up this video, is that let's do it manually. So now I'm saying that when I'm grabbing or reading any variables from in the context of my UAT environment, that means that it will take from this value set, the one that is active. In this action, as you can see here, right, I change it so that action didn't trigger any changes in my deployment pipeline. So that's why, right? Otherwise, you will always have a difference between development and test, but that doesn't trigger any changes in your configuration, okay? That's the purpose. Now, there's one additional thing that unfortunately we need to do also manually. And this is it, because remember that in our dev environment, we automatically bind, right, or connect a connection to a semantic model. So you may think, okay, that happened exactly the same in UAT. Unfortunately, that's not the case. And there's a reason. In my connections, as you can see here, right, in my connection UAT connection, here, if I go to settings, I have that this one is wealth db-uat. So you were thinking, okay, so why don't you do that by programmatically? And the problem is this. Let me show you. I'm going to take over or the semantic model. And I'm going to go to my gateways and connections, right? And if I click on map to, you will see that I'm only seeing on-prem connection dev. I'm a UAT. I don't want that. I want the connection to be dev. But it will allow me to change that one. And this is one of the, I should say, I'm not sure if that's because Microsoft, for any reason, wanted to be that one, or they're planning to extend this functionality in a different way. But for the time being, the connection and the values from the semantic model needs to match in the server and database, unfortunately, right? So again, the database and server coming from my dev is pointing to, you can see this one, dev environment, right? So even though I have a connection, a valid connection to UAT, it doesn't show. So how to fix this, all right? So here is the concept of a deployment rule. We deploy from dev to test, and once we deploy that one, we need to configure a deployment rule. What is that? So let's add a rule, and I'm saying that in my dev environment, or the origin of my dev environment is the database is called wealth-db, and here I want to pick other. I don't want the database to be wealth-db dev. I want it to be. If I click save, and also please understand that this process, it's, I guess Microsoft recognizes that it could be less convoluted, but that's the way it is. As of now, you need to create the rule, and then click deploy one more time, right? So in order to activate the rule, you need to create the rule and then deploy it, right? It took me some time to understand this process. I know that it's, again, a little bit convoluted, and I'm seeing in the community some messages saying that Microsoft is working to make it a little bit different. For the time being, that's the way it is. All right? But now that we have our semantic, or in this case, this, how to say, the rule that will change the origin from naming the database -dev to -UAT. Now, if we go to the semantic model and we go once again, settings and connections, notice that if I click here, now I can see the UAT, which is the service connection that I do want to use in the context of UAT environment. So let's apply, okay? And then once this is getting applied, we can now go again and go into my workspace on the context of my UAT environment. And if I click refresh now we don't have any errors. Does that make sense? One last thing. Okay, so just to make sure that this is showing as, because now once we establish all of this, and unfortunately, I guess, I keep saying unfortunately, it's not unfortunate, I guess it's one of the limitations. We're pushing as much as I can the automation in Fabric, but there's still that I'm not there 100% there yet, but I'm looking forward for Microsoft to actually implement it in the near future, right? So for the time being, I push all I can do on automation, and those are the only two steps that I need to do manually. But once we did this one time, we don't have to do it again. And let me show you. For instance, let's say that we wanted to introduce a new change. I'm just going to do it by just rerun the stage, right? Just to make sure that once we rerun it and then this stage in my pipeline gets executed more than one time, you don't have to reconfigure the semantic model nor to repoint your variable files to set as active in your UAT environment. Now we can run this one over and over and over again, right? And the configuration will be there. You don't have to reapprove it. I think what I need just to do once again is just to approve the deployment on my UAT environment, all right? And once this is complete, I'm just going to check that everything checks in and it's working as expected, okay? And then if we have a production environment, well, it will pretty much be the same, right? So let's just check for you guys to see there's no monkey business, no weird stuff happening, and that once we re-execute the stage, everything, we don't see any changes, as you can see here, right? So we created buying the semantic model once again directly, and yet we don't see any changes between development and test, and that is expected. Otherwise, you will always have differences between your development and test environment if that should not work the way it is right now. Now, what would be my expectation in the near future? One is that probably something that I would like to see is that you can also configure the deployment rules automatically, right? I would love to see that one, to have your deployment rules to be able to, for you to be able to create deployment rules via the API. I would love to see that one happening anytime soon. And in terms of the semantic model binding, which also it's a very recent interface created and make it available by Microsoft. I believe it was October last year, is that it allows you to bind semantic models to connections that the server and UAT are different. Okay, so I'm just going to put a pause on that So you can see right now, again, we are deploying the stage from development to production. It worked, it complete. If I go to my UAT environment and if everything is working as expected, I can refresh and then we don't have any errors, right? The binding stayed as is, okay? And done. In the monitor, if I go here, also I'm executing once again the role level security, right? So there it goes, it's executing. So we can check by clicking on security and I can see now my name or my account is like this. So the last thing that I'm going to show you is, well, basically showing you that we have on Fabric. I'm going to go and enter using my Sevenkio Tech Taco Friday account, right? For you to see that in my workspaces. Just let me refresh this one again. Yes. So let's see my UAT environment. Go to my report. And then since I'm being applied to my user a role level security, voila, I only see fixed, the fixed expense type as expected. Why? Because the role level security applies to me, because I define it that Sevenkio should be applied the role level security fixed expense only. Therefore, I can only see my fixed expense by role level security. Oh, it's been an hour or something, but I think we've covered most of the things that you will be doing when trying to establish a CI/CD workflow. In terms of the the theoretical part and some of the explanations that I gave to you, you can find it in the article, right? So if you have any doubts, and obviously the code and everything, it will be available to you in the series main title. You can get the code. Everything that I show you, it's going to be published and ready for you to use. So if you like it, go there and make use of it, right? Test it and give me your thoughts, right? Your suggestions or new ideas for make this one much better. With this one, I think I'm going to wrap it up for today. And with this one, I'm actually completing the series. It was quite challenging, to be honest. Again, I said that one the last time because of the amount of information that in my mind, there's so many things that I wanted to show you. And just to pick all of the things that I show you, I think is the most relevant part. But the topic is huge, right? We can talk about many other things that happen in between, like authentication and in this case, the interaction with the API. But I think I don't want to overwhelm you. On the contrary, I want you to have just the right information and the tools for you to implement this process in your code, in your work, or probably in your personal project. And I would love to see you succeeding on each and every one of them. All right, then. Thank you very much for joining me through this hour. Again, I hope this has been useful to you. Nothing more to say than thank you and see you next time. Bye.